Last time we were exploring filters in Photoshop, but today we're going to concentrate on just one filter, the Liquify filter. The Liquify filter is capable of doing some fantastic improvements on your photographs, but it also is pretty adept at doing some severe damage to an image. Today we're going to explore it. We're going to learn all about the Liquify filter here in Photoshop. Hi, I'm Terry Van, professional photographer, and I'm teaching you Photoshop. We're here on episode 12 of Photoshop for Beginners, and today we're going to graduate to something more advanced for your Photoshop work. And that's the Liquify filter. Now it is a bit advanced. So if you choose to start using what you learn here today, you'll no longer be considered a beginner in Photoshop. So congratulations for moving on. Now, if you've missed any of the episodes of this beginner's guide to Photoshop, I'll leave a link in the description below so you can go back and start any of these classes and maybe catch up. If you want to go back to the playlist, you can find episodes you might have missed or episodes you might want to rewatch. Photoshop is a tool that can creatively enhance your images, and the Liquify tool falls squarely into that category. Call it cheating if you like, but this tool is one of those things that separates advanced users from the beginners in Photoshop. So let's get into it and see what we can do with the Liquify filter. All right, let's go on into the Liquify filter now that we've got a smart filter engaged. Hit Liquify, and it brings us into a whole brand new dialog box. And we've got some tools over here that we'll go over in a little bit. And we also have some properties. So the first thing to understand is the Liquify tool has a smudge tool, and that's for essentially moving pixels around. So if we click and drag, you can see that we can start moving pixels around and creating whatever it is we want. So we're going to undo that. And of course, undo is Command Z or Control Z if you're on the PC. So you saw what drastic changes you can make on an image, right? So you have up here control of your brush size. So that is the size of the brush. And we also have the same controls we've always had in Photoshop, which is the left bracket will make it smaller, right bracket will make it larger. So I hardly ever use this size. The next thing over here is density. So density is a little bit like the opacity of a brush. So it has to do with how much is going to be moved when you go ahead and do a move inside of a Liquify tool. So we've got this set at density 100. And now watch what happens. You can see that we're moving inside of the brush all the way out, and you have, it's not like a real super soft brush. So let's undo that, and we'll move this down to say 24%. And now when we move, you can see that it's kind of just moving the edges, not the interior of the brush. So we'll leave that at about 24%. Now, if you hear a bunch of wind and stuff in the background, we're having a windstorm here in California, and it's really rolling outside. But I wanted to get this out for you so you guys could have this information and get started on it. So hopefully it'll die down and we won't have that sound here rumbling in the background. So the next thing here is pressure. The pressure has to do with how much effect this brush takes place. So if we come in here and we go and grab and move it across, you can see we've just made a big divot in her head. So let's undo that. That was at pressure of 100%. Let's bring this down to a more realistic pressure, which is going to be probably around 15% or so, somewhere in there. Now we'll make the same move, which is clicking and pushing. You see that we have just subtly moved her hairline. So now you can probably start seeing how this can be pretty effective on making subtle changes on an image. So if you want to make drastic changes, then you bring this pressure up. If you want to make subtle changes, then you keep this pressure low, probably between around 15 or 20, somewhere around in there is probably good. So that's some pretty cool things. And this, again, this is the first tool that we're working with, the smudge tool, and we're able to move pixels around. Now, inside of Liquify, there are some really cool things that are available to us. If you don't have this showing here, you can click this Face Aware Liquify. And what it does, and even if you have a group shot, this will pull down and it will have a face number for each person in your group. So you have the ability to work on a group or a single. In this case, there's only one person in the picture, so they have one face. Now watch what happens. We click on eyes, bring this down, And you have the ability to change really subtle things here. So this is eye size. So obviously if you want to work, like in this case here, she looks like this eye here is a little bit smaller than this eye. So if you have that kind of a situation, you can take this slider, which will operate just that eye. See how we're doing that? And you can make that just subtly bigger. Sometimes people have an eye that's a little bit smaller, and that's a way to make that a little bit more in line with the other eye. If you want to do them together, you would hit the link, and now when you make a move, they both move at the same percentage, okay? So this is a pretty easy way to work on improving the eyes, making them a little bit bigger. You know, if somebody's squinting a little too much, you can make them a little bit bigger. Eye height, same deal. We click on here, we'll do them both at the same time, and you can see that we can enlarge the eyes. Now, obviously, this is something you want to be pretty tender with because you're really changing the way somebody looks, and all you're trying to do is make them look their best usually. So again, if we come down here to eye width, we'll put the link on, and that's going to be the size, the left and right width of the eye. And then we also have eye tilt, so we can tilt these. See how that tilts a little bit? So depending on what you want to do with the eyes, I generally just usually work with eye size when I'm working on somebody, because we don't want to get too drastic on how they look. But I have had customers who've had like a small little eye, and I can enlarge that and make it look a little bit better. So this is a preview. We'll turn this off. It'll show everything that we've done and turn off and on, and you can see what you've done. That's down here at the bottom, the preview button. So you can see all these different controls. We also have eye distance. So watch this. Look, you can bring the eyes closer together or farther apart. You're trying to make somebody look like a lizard, you move them farther apart. So these are all things that you can do with the eyes. Let's go ahead and reset that. Now we're back to where we started. Now let's go down to the next one, which is nose. And you've got some different functions here. You've got nose height. So you can move the nose around. You can do the nose width, make it a little smaller, a little larger, whatever it is you want to do. And then we're going to come down and go to the next one, which is mouth. Watch this. Do we want a little bit more of a smile? Look at that. It brings up the corners. No, we want a little bit of sadder look. So you have the ability here to work with the face and parts of the face. So Photoshop goes in and says, okay, these are the eyes. This is all the functions are going to be dealt with these eyes. Same with here, upper lip, make the upper lip a little thinner, a little thicker. Same with the lower lip, depending on what it is you want to do. And then mouth width, if you want that width a little larger or smaller. And of course the mouth height. You can see all the things that you can do on this. It's pretty amazing. So typically, I'm not going to, it's funny because, again, this is meant to be subtle work, right? So in a smile, if somebody didn't have as good a smile, you can maybe just lift up the corners just a little bit. If somebody was concerned that they didn't think their lips were puffy enough or full enough, you can fill them just a little bit by adding just a little bit there. And so these are things that you can do with the individual parts of a face. And Photoshop really does all the work for you. Now, face shape. This is something that you'll see I do almost on every retouch that I do, and I'll show you why here in just a second. But we'll go over them here. Forehead, you can see we can move the forehead up if you're looking at the forehead here. The chin height, move the chin down, up, move it around. Hardly ever mess with those. Jawline is something that I do mess with because people are always concerned that they look a little too heavy or the camera puts on extra weight during a session, a portrait session. So you have the ability to slim down somebody's face. Think of this as the Ozempic of photography right here. You can thin people down and look at the difference. All we did was move the face width and the jawline. Look at the difference. So it's pretty amazing what you're able to do with just a few things. And again, when I'm doing a photo retouch of somebody's face, I generally move their jawline down a little bit or face width if they feel like they're too heavy. People will almost always look at their picture and say, oh my goodness, I look too fat. Oh, this is something you can fix. You can slim this kind of thing down. So these are the options that you have that are real simple for face aware, and Liquify program does all that for you. So it's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and get out of here. Oh, and if you wanted to keep this, if you wanted to keep your changes, then you just click OK, and then that sends that image back to Photoshop in a complete. See, it comes in here as its own filter. And if you didn't like that, you could turn it off and you could go back to where you were. And of course, if we wanted to, we could go back inside. Because it's a smart filter, we can go back and click on Liquify, and it'll bring us all back to those same numbers. All those numbers will be still in place, and you have the ability to change them all. So it's a pretty cool way to work on an image. Let's go ahead and grab another image. All right, so we have another image here, a little more dramatic. Let's go ahead and do our same routine. Command J, Control J for a new layer. Filter, convert to smart filters. Now we're going to go into filter and go to Liquify. Now we're inside Liquify here. All of our brush parameters stay the same. So once you set those and you come into a new image, you don't have to reset them. You can just leave them there. And that's generally how you're going to do things. You're going to end up leaving them as they are. So let's say, for instance, we wanted to, let's turn this down for just a second. We want to just use the smudge tool, and we want to just kind of pull some of his hair in just a little bit. Maybe it's a little too wild. We can start pushing those pixels in. And I'd rather do a lot of little moves and subtly make these changes than I would of pushing this pressure up and making real wild moves, because while it does take less time, it can be just a little bit, you can really go overboard with this. So I prefer just to have less pressure and just take my time and subtly move these things around and look at it. And I always like to come down here to the preview button and click and say, oh, how did we do? Okay, all right, that's starting to look fine. Now, again, I think I told you earlier that the Liquify tool is one of those tools that, can do some great damage to your images, if you really want to mess with somebody. So you can go into your face aware, go into the eyes, and let's say we'll click on both of them and we'll just make those eyes quite a bit bigger. We can go to his mouth and we're going to give him no smile, and we're going to make his whole everything a lot smaller. Nose, let's make it a lot bigger. And you can see here on our changes, that's what he looked like, and that's what we're turning him into. So again, Photoshop could be used in a lot of different ways, and you have to be careful with the Liquify tool because it can go crazy real quick. So I just wanted to show you those things. So let's cancel out of that. Let's grab a new image. We have a new image up, so let's go ahead and do our same routine. Command or Control J, come up here to filters, convert to smart filters, then come up to here, filter, and go into Liquify. Now we can safely do any changes we want. So we have this nice picture of a dog, and here's some of the things that we can do with it. We have our smudge tool here, right? So our smudge tool allows us to move things around. So if we wanted to move in the ears, we're going to move up the pressure here just for the demonstration purposes of this. We can make the ears a little bit smaller. As we go down, let's say, let's go ahead and make something dramatic happen here. We push in his back so it's a little leaner. You can come over to this tool, which is actually, it's an erase tool. So it brings it all back if you swipe over it. So whatever you did, you can change it back with this tool. So these kind of work in tandem. So if you go a little overboard, you can take the erase tool and subtly bring it back the way it was. So let's reset this. So this tool down here is basically an enlarge tool. So you have this one here, which we'll start to work our way downward a little bit. So what this does is this will make things smaller. If you, inside of this circle, if we press and hold, you see it starts making things smaller. And this does the opposite. This will make things larger. So depending on your brush size, you can kind of add muscles to something or somebody or something. You can start adding these muscles by using these tools that you just click and just keep the click down. Hold that, and as long as you keep it down, it keeps enlarging. So we can see here, let's change that back. See what we've done. We've made these changes on this image. So if we wanted to enlarge this dog's head, we can just cover the whole head and enlarge it, and then we can see the preview here. We've made the head quite a bit larger. Now, this isn't something you're going to use too often, but it's nice to know what some of the tools are available to you that are usable here inside of Liquify. If you're enjoying these free classes on learning Photoshop, take a moment to click the like button, then hit the subscribe button, and remember to hit that little bell icon to be reminded of my next video. I have more videos coming all about Photoshop, so you don't want to miss those episodes. So let's get back to it. All right, we have a new image up, and now this can be a sensitive issue, but truthfully, there are times where you're going to want to change the shape of somebody's body. Now, obviously, you're going to want to do it subtly, and it's always better to do it with permission of the model that you're working with. But I'll show you how this works so that you can get a feel for how you can work in Liquify and actually trim up somebody that maybe has added some pounds based on the way the camera sees them, or they just would like to have a little less weight on their picture. So let's go ahead and show you how this works. We'll go ahead and do the same routine. Command J, filter, convert to smart filters. Then we go into Liquify. Now let's go ahead in here and let's zoom up a little bit. And we'll zoom up into her arm. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use our tool here that is our smudge tool, if you want to call it that. And we'll bring it down to a subtle amount of about 15–16%. Now our brush size has a lot to do with this. So if we use a really big brush, so what we're trying to do is slim her arm down. So if we move in like this and start, you'll see that everything is moving here. It starts to get a little crooked. So what I like to do is use a smaller brush, and maybe for the sake of learning here, we're going to move this up just a little bit faster. So now I can move. Now if we did a strong move, you can see we've just made a dent there. But you can just slightly start smudging in. And once you get a little better, you can use faster. You can go up a little higher on the pressure and move things a little faster. But as you're going, you're just doing this subtly, just slimming down the arm. Now what happens here, one of the things that happens, and is always a dead giveaway that somebody has messed around with the pixels, is if we were to, I'm going to move this up so you can see this a little more dramatically. If we were trying to thin the inside of this arm and we push it, watch what happens. See, the suit goes with it, and maybe we don't want that, right? So that obviously looks pretty lame. So Photoshop has built in some protections for that, and that's this tool right here. It's a painted protection. So watch what happens. We're just going to paint this area here. So what we're doing is we're telling Photoshop, go ahead and move things outside of this, but anything that's masks, we are masked. We're not going to move. So watch this. We'll go back into the smudge tool and watch. We can move this dramatically, make it quite a bit thinner, but we're not affecting what we have painted here, what we've covered up to paint. There's two brushes here. There's obviously the painting tool, and this is the erase tool. So if you went a little bit over, you can go in and erase that back, just like a lot of the other tools have that. But this allows you to protect against having something move that would then be, of course, a dead giveaway that you've made these changes. So let's see what we've done. You know, as you're looking at this, you're probably saying, wow, I can hardly tell. But you'll be able to see here in a second when we do the preview button what we've done. See? We've thinned that arm quite a bit. And again, you might say, oh, well, there's a little bump there, so you can just subtly go in. And again, I prefer to work on a much less pressure because things are going to happen a lot slower. Here's another example. Let's go ahead and come down here to her hips. And we're going to just slightly start bending those in. And that's if this is something that the customer wants or something that you're trying to go for, a look that you're trying to go for. I'm not trying to body shame anybody here or anything like that. This is just showing you how the Liquify tool can be used as a tool that can be a great advantage. I'll tell you what, the customers that I've worked with over the years, that when I slim them up a little bit, they're like, wow, I look great. This guy's such a great photographer. And, you know, that's part of it, but part of it is just trying to make people look their best. And sometimes when they come in for a photographic session, they're not at their best, but they have a perception of how they look. And if I can achieve that for them, then that's what all I'm trying to do. So again, we can go back into this face. And again, almost always, I seldom mess around with the eyes, nose, and mouth, but the face shape I almost always do, and that's just making the face just a little bit thinner. Sliding it down like that. And let's take a look at what we've got. So here is the before, what we started with, and that's the after. So having the ability to work on these images, we can go in here, and again, we can take, zoom up, use our space bar to move around, and let's do this the opposite way. Let's take our protection and protect that arm from getting moved. And then we'll come in here to our smudge tool and we'll just move. Let's say we want to just take off that little hump of a, right there. We can just subtly bring that in. So we're just slowly moving pixels. Now you do have to be careful. On this image, we have just a plain background, but if you have a background there that say has a fence or some sort of pattern, you'll see this image move. So that might be something where you're going to need to do a selection and do something a little bit differently. But you can see you have the ability to change shapes of things. And of course, it's useful here when you're doing images like this, but they're also, you can also think of hundreds and hundreds of ways that you can slightly move something to make it fit your way. Now, do people think this is cheating? Absolutely. This is a very strange, there's always people that'll have negative connotations about this in Photoshop, and some people that think, oh, you should never do this. But truthfully, people do it, and sometimes this is what you need to make that picture the absolute best. So again, we'll protect that area, and then we can just move this in a little bit if we want, changing the figure. And I appreciate this woman suffering through this image that I'm altering here. But the idea here is just to show you what the Liquify tool can do. So again, there's the before and there's the after. And so Liquify tool is a very, very useful tool. I use it all the time, but you need to use it subtly. Don't get crazy with it. Unless, of course, you're trying to mess with a friend or something like that, then of course, have at it. Now, if you have any questions about some of the topics I've covered here, feel free to leave them in the comments below, because I read every single one of them and I'll get back to you. Remember, you can always reach me via email at terry@imagelight.com if you'd rather contact me that way. And I can add you to my mailing list, so when I have a new video, I can go ahead and send you a little note that I've got something else out for you. Thanks. We'll see you next time.